This, the 1890 House Museum and Center for the Victorian Arts, is located at 37 Tompkins Street near the heart of downtown Cortland. The exterior of the house is made of oolithic limestone from Bedford, Indiana. Many local craftsmen worked on the construction of this fine home. There is the family story that tells of Chester Wickwire riding in a carriage in New York City when he saw a very impressive home. He stopped at the front door and asked who owned the house, and learned that the house belonged to James A. Bailey of the Barnum and Bailey Circus. Chester found that the architect Samuel Burridge Reed had just built the mansion in 1888. Chester hired Mr. Reed to build a very similar house in Cortland. This 15,000 square foot home, started in 1888 and completed 18 months later, cost about $75,000 to build. J.B. Tiffany and Company were consultants on the interior decorations. We start our tour in the east parlor on the first floor. Chester and his wife Ardell, who had the house built, are seen in pictures above and on the mantel here. They and their two boys, Charles and Frederick, were the first occupants of the house. Chester passed away in 1910 and Ardell in 1915. The house was vacant for several years before Frederick and his wife, Marion Goodrich Wickwire, decided to remodel it. Once the modernization and renovations were completed, they moved in 1925. 4 years later, Frederick died. Marion continued to live there with her children and later married Judge O'Connor. She lived in the house until her death in 1973. After her death, the house was sold at auction. The Landmark Society of Cortland County was formed, and with a gift from the J.M. McDonald Foundation, purchased the castle. In 1975, the house was opened as a museum. Many of the original furnishings, which had been sold at auction, were later donated and returned to the museum. The east parlor, an informal sitting room, is decorated in the then popular style of Queen Anne Revival. Featured in this room are the cherry woodwork and the richly colored stenciling. Notice the stained glass windows with the prisms and the transoms. They were made by Belcher Mosaic Glass Company. We move on to the hall by the front door. Near the door hangs the only original light fixture in the house. This light was originally powered by gas, but was later converted to electricity. When the house was first built, electricity was not considered very reliable, and was in fact shut off at 9 p.m. The Japanese brass cranes were purchased by the Wickwires in 1895. They used them as lawn ornaments for the front of the house. The recessed area next to the fireplace is called an inglenook. It was a nice place to warm up after coming in from the outside on a cold winter's day. The gold parlor, named for its gold detailing on the molding in the room, was used as a formal entertaining space. The fireplace's overmantel was removed during the 1923-1925 renovations, and the stained glass window bricked in. The window remained hidden for nearly 50 years. During renovation work in 1976, the window was discovered and the work done to repair it. The overmantel was also reconstructed at that time. At the same time, the rest of the room was restored to its original appearance. Scalamandre of New York reproduced the original ivory-colored silk wall coverings for the room. The Wilton-style carpeting is also a reproduction of the original. An original photograph of the gold parlor hangs on the north wall of the music room. The furnishings in this room are all typical of the late Victorian period. The music room adjoining the gold parlor now has a stairway, installed after the house became a museum, which leads to the basement where there are displays about the factory and the history of the house. Featured in this room above the stairway is a portrait of Anna Hilton, an early member of the Board of Trustees of the museum. The portrait was painted by Ger Wickwire, son of Chester's brother Theodore. The music room is the only other room in the house, along with the gold parlor, that has painted woodwork. Moving into the fernery, we first see the portrait of Frederick and his family, who made many changes to the house. The fernery was a major addition to the house and was designed by architect Carl Clark in 1923. The exterior is of the same limestone of the rest of the building. The interior features tile and a statue created by the famed Rookwood Pottery of Ohio. The beautiful stained glass dome in this room is the work of Stanley Worden, who is employed by Henry Keck Stained Glass Studio in Syracuse. At the time of filming, there was an exhibit of antique and modern aprons in the museum, seen here in the fernery. The museum has frequent exhibits as the Board of Trustees encourages the use of the museum by and for the community, as well as by individuals for receptions, parties, and weddings. The library was created in the 1890s from the former evening dining room, when a wall was removed between it and what is now the principal dining room, and sliding stained glass doors with family crests were added to separate the rooms and provide more light to the library. In the large display case in this room, there is an exhibit of some ceramic birds which were given to the museum. The outstanding woodwork in the dining room features golden oak in the doors and wainscoting, and cherry in the coffered ceiling. Just below the ceiling is a papier-mâché frieze. The dining room furniture is original to the house. The oak table can expand to seat 20 persons. The crystal chandelier in this room was the gift of Charles Gibson. The picture above a side table shows the dining room before those renovations. Noteworthy is the lion's crest on each chair. In the dining room, as in all rooms on the first and second floors, the windows have louvered shutters which may be raised to keep the house cool in the summer and for when privacy was needed. The sideboard, of typical design for the Victorian period, stands where there was once a mantel before renovations. Here is the kitchen, which was renovated in the 1920s, most especially by the addition of a large commercial range, which is still in use today. The east entrance, undoubtedly used as a porte-cochere by the family when they arrived at or left the house by carriage or automobile, features perhaps the greatest treasure of the museum, the beautiful stained glass windows and door created by the studio of Louis Comfort Tiffany. Tiffany also assisted in the interior design of the house at the time of its construction. A woven wire design is embossed on all the hardware in the house: doorknobs, window latches, hinges, and even the pulls on the pocket doors. The coffered cherry ceiling of the entrance hall is especially noteworthy. The focal point of the entrance hall, however, is the stairway of rich woodwork, under which is the cozy inglenook. The stairway leads to the hallway of the second floor, where this painting by Ger Wickwire of his daughter Constant is found. Ger was the son of Theodore. In one of the many display cases found in this area, there is the bodice of the dress worn by Constant in her portrait. The embossed wall covering in this hallway imitates Spanish leather and conceals the original intricate ribbon and swag design of the stenciling used here and in other hallways. This room was used as a guest bedroom. It is now used as a research library. People can look up information in the Kellogg Library. An extensive collection of photos of residents of the house and their contemporaries is housed in this room. This is the master bedroom, which is highlighted by the cherry woodwork and furniture. The bedroom suite was in the Wickwires' earlier home on Tompkins Street. The bed and dresser were later given to the museum. Several portraits and photographs of the family can be seen in this room. The fireplace here augmented the heat of the central heating system before the more nearly modern system was installed in the 1920s. Note the Cupid figurines on the mantel. In the tower alcove, where the curve of the glass in the windows is the same as that of the wall, there is a fainting couch. Undoubtedly a necessary item of furniture for the days when ladies' corsets were laced so tightly that they caused the ladies often to faint. A photograph of the bedroom before it was renovated is among the items on the desk in this room. The master bathroom was installed during the renovations of the 1920s and replaces two dressing rooms between the master bedroom and the morning room. The tile in this bathroom is from the Rookwood pottery, which provided the tile in the fernery. Noteworthy is the German-style shower that provides a nearly 360-degree spray at several levels. The morning room is the most recently renovated room in the museum, thanks to the generosity of board members and the gift of time and effort by volunteers. It was opened to the public in 2010. The windows in this room, like all the windows on the first and second floors, include a stained glass transom over the upper sash. This room was called the morning room, as it was here where the lady of the house met with her staff in the morning to give assignments, to go over the schedule of the day, and perhaps to take her breakfast. It was also in this room where she received guests informally on a particular day of the week, her so-called at-home day. The furniture in this room is all from the Victorian period. This is the original bathroom on the second floor. In the 1920s, the master bathroom was added and was used by Mr. and Mrs. Wickwire, while the original bathroom was used by other members of the family. This is a room that was recently added to the tour of the house. This room was used by one of the boys as his bedroom. There are a number of pictures of occupants of the house on display. Pictured here are Frederick and Charles. The servants' quarters are located in the back part of the house on the second floor and at a slightly lower level. Between the doors of each of the two rooms is an intercom that connects to both the kitchen and the master bedroom. Each room is large enough for two persons. One room has a sink, and in this room there is a carpet beater hanging on the wall, and on the floor a Wickwire vacuum cleaner, the suction for which is provided by treading on a kind of seesaw. The windows in these rooms do not have a stained glass transom, unlike other rooms on the second floor. The rooms are furnished with typical needs of the servants and seem to be very pleasant, being light and airy. The back stairway, which is very narrow, leads from the servants' rooms to the kitchen below. The third floor, often called the ballroom, has been modified from time to time and now includes a billiards area and a game area. In this alcove, there are architectural drawings used when the house was built and some informational posters about billiards, among other things. The billiards table is original to the house, but for many years was in the Fitzgerald house next door. The table was only recently returned to its former place. When the house was occupied by the families, the room was often used for parties, and sometimes the men retired to this area for cigars and conversation. During the 1890s, the partitions in the room were removed to create a large ballroom. Evidence of the partitions can still be seen on the floor and ceiling. Here, young Charles and Frederick could entertain their friends and woo young ladies on the dance floor. Today, there are several displays of antique items, such as a stereopticon, a model ship, a train, and a bank, as well as a child's sleigh and toboggan. Adjacent to the ballroom is the tower room, which was used by the family children as a playroom, and today contains many antique toys. This room, like the tower areas on the floors below, has windows conforming to the curve of the tower wall, and affords a fine view of Lower Tompkins Street. Climbing to the cupola on the fourth floor, you can see the roof of the carriage house behind the main house. With windows on all four sides of the room, one can look in all directions and see the city and even the high school on a hill to the south. Also in the cupola is an 1892 map of Cortland, showing the location of the Wickwire factory on South Main Street. On the west side of the house is the Fitzgerald house, while on the east side is the red brick house, which is the current SUNY Cortland Alumni House, originally built by a Wickwire. Visitors to the museum are encouraged to start their tour of the house in the Orientation Center, which is located in the basement. There one will find a display about Chester Wickwire moving to town from his father's farm south of McGraw. Also found there are diagrams of the early looms used to weave the wire products produced by the Wickwire brothers, among such products as food covers, sieves, corn poppers, and nails. One photograph shows a large industrial loom in the factory itself. Following the picture of the loom is one of Chester himself. Next is a painting of the factory with all its additions over the years. The artist who painted the picture of the factory on South Main Street used some artistic license, as the factory was not quite as large as depicted. In time, the factory had its own smelters to produce the metal for the wire cloth. including state-of-the-art electric furnaces in the 1960s. Wickwire Brothers was the largest employer in Cortland County until it was closed in the early 70s and later destroyed by fire. Following are pictures of the family and one of the James Bailey House in New York City. The 1890 house is similar to the Bailey House, but not an exact copy. There are several pictures of the family and of the house before the changes and additions were made in the 1920s. The 1890 house is an example of the Chateauesque architectural style popular during the Victorian and Gilded Ages, the late 1800s. To study this period, students from local schools and the college often visit the museum. The museum is open every week from Thursday through Saturday when visitors are always welcome. For group tours, reservations are encouraged and may be made by calling 607-756-7551. The building can be rented for weddings and special events.